while you're here, if you would like to introduce yourself, what your work is, and we'll just go around very briefly. I was just saying that the third year students have to have a pretty tight schedule. There are 10 tutorials that we will have. They will probably be, all the PhD tutorials will probably be on Thursday, some of them will be on Wednesdays, and that will be, so Wednesday, Thursday will pretty much be the structure for the tutorials. And there's a couple people in here that are applying for the AHRC. You need to speak to the newbies in the group, there's 4 here that have them, and they can help you stay sane, or whatever it is. Okay.
Yes, and don't just apply at the last minute, please.
Well, that's not going to happen. I mean, it's just not going to happen. So, Henry, on to you. What would you like to tell this group, and any advice? Well, you said you couldn't stay. So.
What do I want to say?
Well, your work, your research.
My head's in timetabling, it's not in research. Yeah, I'm Henry Rogers, as we know, most people anyway. I run the Art-Based Masters Programme, and my new position is the Head of Postgraduate Studies in Birmingham School of Art, which is another layer of crazy bureaucracy that has to be dealt with, but never mind. And at this point in time, I cannot even think about what my research is about.
Well, let's say exquisite methods.
Oh, yeah.
And we're
I've
got to get you out of the time planning head, and we're going to.
Yeah.
Can you mention about the Tate and what we're doing with
that?
that?
We're working on a project called Exquisite Methods, which will hopefully end up as a publication that will look at artistic research practice within the context of the whole sort of PhD research scenario, and we're also kind of connecting that to a project that's happening in Amsterdam, which is called the Creative Doctus Award, which is a, shall we say, a strange variant on the PhD that seems to be gaining a lot of ground in other European countries. So there's lots of people who've started to pick up on this idea in France, in Portugal, in Greece, and other Eastern European art schools, because the whole sort of dynamic relationship there is very different to what it is here. So we're kind of working through some of that, and I'm interested in eco-philosophy and queer theory as per usual. Why not? And we're working on a project with the museum that's going to be exhibition based. Well, it's going to be 2 parts actually. One part of it is looking at queer practices in the Arts Council collections, and the other part of it will be looking at creating a sort of research scenario working between the water hole and the gas hole. The main exhibition will be in the gas hole, but the water hole will be seen as a kind of responsive research space in relationship to that show. So whatever kind of comes out of it from what we've been thinking about in terms of erotic praxis and creating a sense, that's where we'll be driving part of what we're doing within the context of that show. So that's still to be confirmed by the museum, but they seem to be keen on the idea. Okay.
Great, that's great. And you are the Director of Studies for Alberto and Jakob.
Yes,
Emily.
and Emily and Grace and Sheridan and Gay and yeah, it stops there. No, Craig hasn't turned up, so.
Oh, good. I mean, that'll be good. But, okay, that makes sense.
But yes, some people are moving speedily towards their completion.
Yes, I mean, it depends on the speed depends on whether or not you're self-financed or you have any level of financing linked. So you get more of a chance of survival if you are self-financed. That is to say, they give you extensions and stuff like that, but the less that is the case, the more that you are being sort of financed, the less wiggle room there is to finish. So it's just...
There seems to have been a kind of change in attitude with funding councils where it's very much about people have to finish on time, you have to be absolutely completed on time, you have to move through quickly.
Or
They won't allow people to.
they won't give the doctorate out.
No.
That's how draconian it is.
I mean, it is becoming very draconian. So you have to keep your eye on that time frame, really.
Is there still a sort of blacklisting process where the department?
Yeah, well, they will.
Yeah.
They will.
They will do that too, but it's actually, but it first starts at the level of the researcher themselves.
Right.
And then I think because Goldsmiths was blacklisted for a while.
Yeah,
I think it's
For a lot of non-completions, they
Yeah.
got blacklisted.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the students also then don't get the PhDs now,
Yeah.
so they don't get to finish. It's rough. Here's the time.
But it is getting difficult.
We've got the money while you're kids.
You don't even.
Because
Okay.
everybody needs a PhD.
Everybody needs a PhD. PhD.
Didn't you know that?
It's cake or death. Okay. Okay. Any questions for Henry? Good. Theo? Oh yeah, Sophie.
Are you going to be my second?
I think
I'll ask you in public. So
I think that you are on for the second.
Thank you.
Yes, I think I am on the list as the
Okay.
second. Yes.
Excellent.
Good. Theo, do you want to introduce yourself and your work?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. I was trying to work out how to distill it into one or two sentences. I've been. Hello. I'm Theo. I've been here. This is my third year at BCU. Before that, I was based at Goldsmiths where I did my PhD on, very broadly, sort of the relationship between ethics and aesthetics in art practice, and that's sort of recently given rise to a number of projects which look totally unrelated, but which aren't in my head. So there's a special issue of a journal coming out in a couple of years on the concept of repair in art practice, linking art practice with science and technology studies as well, some of the authors. I've been working on a project on fiction as a kind of methodology in art practice, not just written fiction, but sort of visual fictions, which is turning into a book, and I'm sort of currently trying to lay the foundations for a kind of future project on lying, different forms of lying in art practice, camouflage, visual lies. So those are sort of three balls I'm throwing in the air.
And are you available to be a supervisor or a mentor?
I can make myself available.
See, that's why Theo's here. So if any of his work resonates with your work, then make sure you get a hold of him afterwards, because I think it's been very important.
I've been meaning to come to these seminars for the last sort of 2-3 years, so this seems like it's the first time
Good.
I'm actually going to be able to.
Excellent. That's brilliant.
The texts look great.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Stuart.
Hello. I wasn't expecting this many people as I walked through the door. I'm a bit flummoxed now. So I know some of you in the room, but lots of you I don't. My name's Stuart Whips. I teach here. I'm an artist when I'm not teaching here, and sometimes when I am. So I teach predominantly on the undergraduate programme. I wanted to talk to you all about something specific, actually, rather than just kind of broadly about. Well, that sounded more like an introduction, but anyway. The project space, which is next to the school office, where Article Gallery used to be. So if you have a look there now, you'll see that the room has been opened out. It's just one room now. There's a variety of things that will be happening in there, starting from next month in October, doing some projects with Craig and New Art West Midlands. But what we're also looking to do is have students from across the range of activities in the school really do things with that space that are also outward facing. It's something that Johnny and I have talked about in the past, about how, that we have practice-led PhD candidates here, but not often kind of opportunities for them to show the work that's happening. And I think there's some incredible work that does happen in the building, and we want to try and share it with the public a little bit more. So what I was hoping you could do, this was my thought, but you could take this in whichever direction you wish, is perhaps to come up with some sort of strategy as a group, for how you could use it perhaps semi-regularly. Maybe it's once a quarter, maybe it's less than that, maybe it's more than that. The kinds of things that we want to do in there are short. I think it doesn't work well to have a show that's on for anything longer than a week, really, because we don't have direct public access. So we should be doing things that are more event-based, performative, whatever they may be. But I guess the main message is we absolutely want to have some activity from PhD students happening more publicly and more, disseminating it, not just kind of in here. Does that make sense? The best thing to do, I think, would be just to go and have a look at the space and see how it would make sense. And I think there's lots of things you will come up with that I'm not thinking of, that you will. And if you... A good thing to do would be to get back to me really within a couple of weeks with an initial idea, perhaps, of how this could work. I think something that feels like a programme that would take place over a year would make sense, because it's then something that we can promote actively. But I see that I'm just springing this on you, so I don't.
Well, there's a...
I also think,
sorry,
John, that because we've opened the space up in the way we have, that we should be able to use it for people's vivas if there's an exhibition part to their practice.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So I think that it's really important that the work is seen in an appropriate space and is set up properly, rather than some office in Parkside, where it wouldn't be set up properly. So if the work is, or whether it's installation work or it's wall based or whatever it is, it should be presented as professionally as we can present it, because it's a major part of what you're doing as a practitioner in the context of research. So
great. I mean, one of the major themes for the Centre for Contemporary Art Research is this notion of radical matter that we've been talking about. So radical matter in whether it's method, it's material, it's sex, it's whatever that happens to be. That's going to be the driving force of this year. And it'll connect with exquisite methods. So the exquisite methods, is happening at the Tate, and then it's going into the Amsterdam Link and Berlin. So there might be a way of doing a kind of cross-fertilization with that, or something around that side of it.
I mean, really, I made a long-winded effort of basically saying there's this space and it's for you to use. And let's try and do it in some way that feels semi-coherent, just for a kind of promotional point of view and getting people in, I think. So,
what's the best way for people to contact you?
It would be better if you spoke, I think, as a group or as 2 or 3 groups, and then came up with something, and then just email me about your initial ideas, and we can just sit and have a chat about how we make that work.
How open are you to having other institutions involved?
Totally open. Anything.
I'm just thinking in terms of funding opportunities and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for instance, the initial events that we're doing with New Art West Midlands, we're also looking at perhaps working with New Art Gallery Walsall and the artist development scheme that they're running, and a number of artist-led spaces from around the Midlands, so they get to kind of come and use this as a hub to kind of share that activity, but as broad as we can, really.
But just specifically with the M3C funding, that if we get a group of PhD students across those 3 cities, then it's called a cohort development fund.
Yeah.
Then they can. Yeah, listen.
This is what we want. Already think about how we get some money.
Yeah, that's right.
As well.
It's a good group.
PDF, WTF, lots of acronyms.
Yeah, but I mean, there's money there if we involve it.
We'll have it. So yeah, that would sound great. But also, it sounds like a nice idea aside from the money. So.
Also, there's been we're in the middle. Henry and I are in the middle of making a partnership with the British Library on questions around, and it's part of this work that we're doing with Amsterdam, non-text-based PhDs, basically. And so one of the big meetings is tomorrow. But we could really get that energy happening here, and possibly VARI, the V&A Research Institute. They've agreed to come on as a partner for a larger bid that we're doing, and they could come on in a different way as well. So we've got at least those 2 major institutions.
Great. I can't stay, but I do intend to come back for some of these sessions
Excellent.
in other weeks. But
Good.
thank you for listening to me. It's nice to see you all.
Yeah,
And,
thanks, Stuart.
see you again soon.
Yeah,
shall we escape as well?
yeah, you can escape too. Would you like to say what you're?
Yeah, absolutely.
And who you are?
So I'm Craig Ashley. I'm Director of New Art West Midlands. It's good to have a bit of an introduction from
from Stuart there to give a sense of the possibilities around collaboration. The New Art West Midlands programme, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, you'll be familiar with some of the key kind of programme strands. So we work with New Art Gallery Walsall to deliver an artist and curator development programme, and have done for a few years now. So they arrange studio visits with artists, between artists and curators. But they also do residencies at a number of different sites across the region, and trips, away days to different areas, just to look at opportunities and foster kind of next steps in practice, really, whatever stage of career you might be at as an artist or a curator. Another programme strand is the New Art West Midlands Graduate Exhibition, which you may have seen at the Waterhall last year, also at MAC, Wolverhampton Art Gallery, and the Herbert Art Gallery in Coventry. So they're multi-site exhibitions which are aimed at, again, supporting artists specifically coming from higher education, graduates into the next steps of their careers, and that's been running. So we're going into the 5th year now, and that's got a proven track record in terms of creating those opportunities, but crucially relationships for artists. There's an infrastructure there. So I'm relatively new in post. I started the beginning of August, so I'm just working on turning point, as it was once called, into New Art West Midlands. There's a bit of operational stuff there, but trying to be strategic around links with the national network. So it's part of a national contemporary visual arts network. Every region has this network that feeds into the national. We're trying to take key messages around regional distinctiveness, around our strengths, and our strengths together as well, to petition and lobby central government to invest in art and culture more widely. And it's really about strengthening the visual arts sector. So it would be interesting as we continue. I'm based here. I'm based in office F11, to continue talking, and there'll be those opportunities, I think, in-house, but also that's a very arts venue, speaking in-house, but also region-wide. My focus really is on making sure that our reach is across the West Midlands. So there might be opportunities there for collaboration with other institutions, but also our neighbours in the East Midlands too. So I might kind of key in with some of the opportunities that you have in your individual works.
I mean, the New Art West Midlands has a number of committees involved, as it were, which is so exciting, and one of them is the research committee, and it brings in Coventry, Herefordshire, Wolverhampton, and Coventry. I said that already. And
let's go through them again. So it's Coventry, Stoke, or Staffordshire.
Yeah, Herefordshire, Worcester, Wolverhampton, and anyway, and there's been some money involved with that. So there's ways in which to organize the stuff we're interested in, because I think that the what's coming out of particularly the PhD environment, but the Birmingham School of Art anyway, is a totally different way of approaching art. It sort of disrupts the normal canon, and it's useful to get that message out and also to bring people in. So, and the other thing is that the New Arts West Midland is connected to a larger network called CVAN, which is Contemporary Visual Arts Network. And CVAN is right now searching for what they would consider the compelling questions. Like, so one of them is the kind of work that you've been doing about, how does the public understand or appropriate art, the basing the work and so on. It's stuff like this. So, I mean, it sounds all very, I don't know if it sounds dry to you, but it's not meant to be dry. Does it sound dry? When is the opening? Or when is the big party?
So we're looking at a launch on the 10th of November in Coventry, which marks the kind of rebrand, and looking at the project strands, including the research focus element of the programme. So it's exciting.
Good.
And I think there's a couple of other things just to mention. You said about visiting the lectures that you wanted to bring in. So I'm a curator as well. So there's a show just opening tomorrow night at MAC. Peter Kennard, his off-message show. You're very welcome to come along to that opening. But there's a conference called Lessons in Physics, which relates to that exhibition, looking at the physical act, or in visual arts specifically. But as broadened out, Johnny's going to be presenting at that. We're hoping Kate Tempest, the spoken word artist, will present as well. And I'm waiting to hear back on Joseph Kazoo. I'm not sure he's...
Oh, it'd be interesting if you could get over here. I mean,
yeah. So that would be... So there's potential around those programs that I'm trying to bring in. Lessons in Physics continues on from the 2013 conference, Lessons in Geography. And I think that we could kind of bring that in and build upon that, these lessons. But I think it's around that bridge from academic to public as well, and explaining the research, the led practice to a wider audience, which we are always willing to kind of work with.
great, excellent. Thank you. Any questions for Craig? A very quiet group.
I get very confused about where the New Art West Midlands fits in, as I'm now studied in West Midlands but live in East Midlands, and half the things are, it's not always clear where my position is.
Oh, just be in all of them. It's just like,
I just live everywhere.
That's right.
Subscribe to have an affiliation with every region.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong.
But you don't know what you can apply for,
Yeah.
and that I think needs to be clear.
That's a
That's a
really
good point,
good point. I think that's some comments around the graduate exhibition in particular. Said where it's related to.
And in fact, can people in this group who are PhD students, can they apply for the graduate exhibition?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
I mean, don't you have to graduate?
Yeah, you have to graduate.
I mean,
But it doesn't have to be a PhD, it could be an MA.
no, but I mean, everybody's not graduated yet.
But it's graduated from some degree.
Oh, I see. You have to have just graduated from some degree.
Yeah.
That's open.
It is quite open.
Wow.
So I'll look into that actually, PhD, but I think BA and MA absolutely. So.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thanks. Any other questions? Good. Well, did David leave forever, or did he leave just to answer his phone?
I think he just left to answer his phone.
Because he was going to be the next person up, and he ran off. Okay. So you know who I am. I'm Johnny Golding. I'm professor of philosophy and fine art. I'm the director of the newly named Center for Contemporary Art Research. I hope we don't call it CCAR. I'd like to call it CCAR or something, but I know
international at the front.
it does have international at the front. It doesn't always have international at the front because it sounded like one was like running out of letters of the alphabet. You know, ICCARTXY. You know, but international on the outward-facing global scene for sure. Oh, good, David, he's back. No, that's right. I wanted you to introduce yourself before I went into my spiel.
All right.
David.
I'm now. Oh,
yes,
right.
sorry.
I'm David Cheeseman. I've worked here for nearly 20 years. I'm a lecturer in fine art. I'm an artist, work with sculpture and installation, interested in kind of researching scientific methodologies and how I might appropriate them for artworks, also interested in illusion and philosophically more interested in new materialism at the moment. Working on a big project for 2018, which is I think going to be in Gloucestershire, of a huge installation in an agricultural greenhouse, which kind of working with Bergsonian notions of time and kind of cosmological framework for that with a film that I've deconstructed. I supervise some people here, Joe and Anna and Grace and Sherry.
And Mattia, you're sort of like,
And Mattia
you're
is
like
kind
the
of,
mentor.
I'm reading. Yeah.
Yeah. How are you finding that?
Well, I've only just started,
Okay,
so
good.
yeah. I mean,
I think great is the answer. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's me.
Great. Thank you. That's great. Any questions for David? Good. So if any of this sounds like you need to contact David, you know, for any of the things, don't hold back. So anyway, so I am Johnny Golding. I'm Professor of Philosophy and Fine Art. I'm the Director of the International Center for Contemporary Art Research. We're also still with Zetesis, which will have the Math and Flesh journal hopefully coming out by March, is the new predicted deadline. I'd like to make another attempt at getting people to think about writing for that, or people that you think you want in there who are major players on the radical matter, basically, is in the way in which the logic of senses go into new forms of materialisms. So that's behind it. So it's called Math and Flesh, but we're gonna Lee and I have been discussing this. He's involved with a very big project right now, which is why we can't possibly get this out before February. We're also, as Henry mentioned, involved with the exquisite methods. Part of this seminar is to really understand or try to foreground what it really means to do practice, philosophically, epistemologically, and so on, and to sort of reinvigorate the debate around STEAM, or anyway, to get rid of the debate on STEM. I don't really care if it's called STEAM. I'm bored with that title now, but to understand how the scientific approach is not the best science, and that in fact science as knowledge is much more appropriate. And anyway, so that's sort of the approach to say that there is a way. I think that the work that Barnaby's doing with Bataille and the way in which that has been rethinking a certain form of sexual energy in terms of rethinking the I don't know if it's the excess or the abject or whatever it is, but it's quite important for what we're thinking through in this environment. Maybe we'll talk about their projects in a second. I'd like to say that I've been tasked with putting in a lot of bids, and maybe they'll come to fruition, maybe they won't. But what I'm actually interested in doing is the bid on radical matter and the wild sciences. So, philosophy, art, and the wild sciences. And there's links right now with Berlin and Cologne to make that happen. There's a big Kathy Acker conference that's happening that our group here, CCAR, has been invited to attend, and we're just trying to get the funding now from Cologne to get everybody who's in here there, and that'll be in March. So let me know if you want to be involved, and if you don't, that'll be great, because then we can pay for your trip. What else? I think, let's see, I've got a number of new articles out. I've got the book is almost finished on the radical matter, and if you see that I write completely crazy things like Staying with the Trouble by Barad, you know it's because it was probably at 4 in the morning. I just finished something else, which is not a great excuse, but it's the only one I've got. So that's kind of the situation there. I've got 17 PhD students, I think 8 of which are Director of Studies, and the rest are seconds and something. So again, I've had to be very concentrated on when I see everybody, and very hard about not having other people, new people coming in. So we are who we are. You know who all your supervisors are, and so on and so forth. And anybody that wants to do an outreach to Stuart or to Theo or Rob, who couldn't be here, he sends his apologies. Don't hold back. All good. Nick Gebhardt was going to try and get here, but he couldn't get here. He's in media, but he's on Ed's thing. He's fantastic as a supervisor. And also Dina Saber is also quite an interesting artist who's in the media side. She works on Middle East, or sort of very weird war games, drones and things like that. It's quite her work is incredibly interesting on that particular level. Okay, any questions for me? Good. Okay, now, let's just go around very quickly. Can we put the fan on or open a window so that people just don't die? Maybe we put the fan on and open a window. Thank you.
And planning. Johnny, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
It's a bit random. Is Lisa Methrall on the PhD supervision, in its PhD supervision team?
We want her to be,
Right.
but there's a number of people that are concerned about their contract.
Okay.
So I'm not sure beyond that. What's happened? Is the fan like doing something weird?
No, it just decided it was going to take off, but it's okay.
Okay. Okay. Ah, air. God. Okay. Right. Barnaby, we'll start with you.
I'm Barnaby Adams. I'm writing up my doctoral thesis. The title's still a secret. Effectively, it's about the work of George Bataille, studying the division of consciousness in Hegel's division of consciousness as interpreted by Alexander Kochev in mid-20th century French thought, and applying it to the formation of an object, the formation of which is confused with its content, the object's form and its content are confused.
Can you use that again? There was like some drum roll that happened.
I arranged that.
That's right. That's right. It's very clever.
The division of consciousness, it's examining the division of consciousness as a formation of an object. The object has the formation of which is confused with its content. So the form and the content of the object become confused. Also, complicating matters further is an overlay of Niels Bohr's idea of complementarity and a complexity of relations and unknowability, and possibly even the notion of the cut in terms of something which the other side of the cut becomes unknowable. I wonder if that isn't possible to overlay that on the division of consciousness itself. So that's it's purely theoretical. I don't make any art or do anything other than think and write.
Can you say how Bataille figures into this?
Everything you said earlier on is absolutely accurate, except for
the main thing.
Except for one tiny little change. You use the verb to rethink, but I would have it as pre-think.
Okay, I like that.
And so I think that everything that the stride into anti-epistemology has been anticipated by Bataille, but because he lacked the motive to create structure and to model his ideas, or to formally model his ideas, it's not been recognised in his writing. Unfortunately for Bataille, I think it's there.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, we're going to go this way. Craig, do you want to say anything about what you're beginning to work on? No. Okay, he's a newbie. Okay, Alberto.
Alberto, last year my PhD. I don't remember the title of my thesis.
Oh, for heaven's sake!
It's also a secret.
This is what happens to you by the time you get to the end.
It's also a secret. I'm trying to reconceptualize painting regardless of its traditional means of production, and I'm also interested in framing diffractive modalities to approach in a poetical and at the same time analytical way artworks.
Can you talk about the question of the facing and the encounter?
Yeah. So if you don't look at painting for its traditional features, traditional materials or whatever that usually accompanies the recognition of a painting, maybe, well, what I'm trying to propose is to say that painting is this facing, which means it's an event in which the other is is encountered all at once. So that's it. They, no matter how the artwork is produced, if you feel like you can face it all at once, that is a painting. If it's an artwork, if it works. Of course, this way of talking is not very accurate, because it will imply that something exists there as an artwork and you encounter it, but that is because we will need to go discuss the...
We're using the Deleuzian notion of encounter, not the coming upon it.
Yes, yeah. It's just that the Deleuzian version of encounter still uses a verb that is misleading, so it's kind of difficult to be accurate and concise.
So it's an acephalytic version of encounter. It's without the head.
Yeah.
Without the rational.
Although I don't like that way of talking either. So I'd say it's.
That's why it's very difficult writing the thesis.
Yeah, because if you say acephalytic, then it feels like you are still acknowledging a divide between mind and body, and we actually don't want to acknowledge that.
Yeah, that's true. Any questions for these two characters? No?
So I'm Ed. I do my PhD part-time. The rest of my time I work with musicians, composers, artists, performance makers to create events. My research title, at the moment, is Aesthetic Acts, Live Music Production as a Curatorial Praxis. And I'm interested in the way that the move towards curatorial might inform live music production, and how the experience of producing music might suggest or propose a musical form of the curatorial.
Which you're calling?
Musicality.
Musicality, and who are the main interlocutors?
Catherine Malibu would be my primary interlocutor. Others, possibly Gigi Placar, Derrida, and I don't know.
Any questions for Ed? No. Oh, Theo. You talked about your research, yeah. Yvonne.
I'm a sculptor. I'm at the moment at the stage of forming a PhD title around sculpture and expressionistic imperatives, and that's about as far as I've got.
Okay. And you want to be working with Jonathan Harris?
Yeah.
And Anthony Downey, right?
Yeah.
Hi. Hi.
Do we get like any get out of jail, free card or not? It's like first.
No, just if you can introduce yourself, that'd be a good start.
Hello, I'm Tadas, and a lot of people know me. I finished.
But a lot of people don't know you.
So I finished fine art in the school, and then I finished the philosophy course with Johnny, and then I had a breakdown. I'm doing the PhD, but I'm not doing it in here. I'm doing it actually in school.
Far away.
Not far.
Still in Mecca.
So yeah, I'm doing it in the School of Acting, and my proposal briefly would be proposing a slightly different kind of theatre which focuses on materiality instead of discursivity. So it's actually importing material thinking, which is I think more pertinent to visuals and music, into theatrical stage.
And when you say material thinking, what do you actually mean by that? I don't know. Okay, sorry. And who's your supervisor?
Sasha.
Yeah, but I mean they don't know that.
Alexander Dundirovich is my main. And another one, the Manfredi, Dr. Sam Atkinson, and then maybe John at some point. Although I'm not sure.
Just explain that it's 17 students.
Well,
I'm just saying. Okay. So.
Hi, I'm Sarah. My title is, let's see if I can remember this now. I've had 2 days of explaining it to everybody, so it's all very, very muddled in my head now, and I have actually no idea what I'm doing. It's to do with the sensuousness of error, and so I'm looking at that through the lens of glitch, art theory, complexity, synesthesia, and new materialism. I'm trying to find ways that we can take all of the mistakes that in a sort of a bygone era we might have discarded as being irrelevant, and to find a kind of a way of experiencing, I guess, digital ephemera in a way that might make more sense to us.
And when you say new materialism, the twins here, what do you mean by this?
Well,
Didn't see new.
I think for me, I'm sort of looking at materiality in terms of what effect it has on the human body. Because traditionally, previously I looked at digital and analog film, and obviously they have very, very different properties. But we experience the digital sphere in a different way, and it has different effects on us as well. So I'm also looking at Marshall and Eric McLuhan and sort of media theory, and how particularly Eric McLuhan is sort of talking about how the sheer amount of information that we have is just overwhelming to our senses, and so I'm sort of trying to find a way that we can ground. So I guess for me, sort of that materialism is about attaching some form of body to.
Do any people who mention the word materialism and new materialism, does anybody here think that there is, and if so, what is it, the difference between matter and materialism? And what does it matter? What's the difference, if there is a difference? What mileage do you get out of materialism?
Well, I may be very wrong about this. So
that's a good way to start. That's an upbeat way, yes.
But I guess matter, from a sort of a lay perspective, you think of matter as being, things that you can touch, and materialism isn't necessarily that. I don't think it can be those things, but it can also be.
We'll just let that lie. I just want to put it on the table because there's obviously big debates about that.
Materialism is already conceptually infected.
Yeah.
Whereas matter is.
Thank you very much.
Whereas matter is not.
Bringing the syphilis back to the table. Well done. Okay. Excellent. Okay, that's good. Okay, yep. Good.
Me?
Yep.
Oh, right, I'm Sophie. My PhD title is really long, so I'll just do a brief version of it. I'm exploring images of young women, particularly I'm looking at the curve in the body of the young woman and how they're represented in the media, but also in art. And I'm taking, as my sort of springboard, Degas young dancer, age 14, and I'm sort of reproducing that in sculptural form, but also in video and film, and I'm working a lot with this sort of symbiotic relationship between analog and digital. Is that enough?
Might be. Who are your interlocutors on this?
Well, I've been reading a lot of Kostova, and really love her book, The Feminine and the Sacred, because it talks a lot about young women and their sort of history of hysteria and fits and things like that, and then the Indian dancing girls as well. It's Clements and her, as you know, writing letters to each other. So just that materiality is really interesting. It's really inspired me to do a piece with letters in it as well. I think it'd be really interesting.
So this thing, the curve.
Yeah.
Are you talking about the spine then?
Yeah.
Yeah. And why is that? How did that become your focal point in this question?
Really because of Degas' piece, because he put her in a pose which really exaggerated the curve. And a lot of people at the time were very, very verbal in their abuse of his sculpture, and they said things like the dancer characterised every vice in man that you can see, and she was just a young girl, age 14, and they thought it was such a provocative pose that it was really outrageous, and that's quite interesting in terms of contemporary art as well, to see what we find out.
Yeah, that's what I want you to get at, this outrage. What is it that does that tick?
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
Hi, I'm Simon. I'm a first year PhD student with Johnny and with you all. Johnny's my first supervisor. I did work, still working, at the Victoria and Albert Museum, where I'm a conservator, largely based in the paper and photographic section as a senior conservator. I've been at the museum a long time, and there are certain things that I'm very interested in exploring here with you all, hopefully, and particularly with supervisors and people. I'm interested in the relationship between objects, artworks within the museum environment and the informational material we produce
as conservators and people and within the museum, and how they become entangled with and in relationship with the objects that they were made of.
So can you clarify in relation to the Raphael cartoons that you were first...
Yes, so the Raphael tapestry cartoons were one of the first sets of objects that arrived at the V&A in about 1860. There was a groundbreaking work by the V&A's first curator, and I'm very interested in the word care, and that curator comes from the notion of care, and he set in motion some very innovative practices. One of them was something called a condition report, where he had these objects photographed, very cutting edge technology at the time. Wet collodion on glass negatives were made of the cartoons. It was an extraordinary feat. The negatives measure 3 feet square, they're on glass, they're incredibly fragile now. And the prints from those were used by Redgrave in a new object that we now call a condition report. And he annotated on the surface of the photographs the symptoms and material nature of those objects.
Which meant that the cartoons themselves weren't actually made like a big painting, right? They are all those stitches.
Yes,
and
I mean what he found and has subsequent, I'm very interested in following this object, this genesis for this condition report, particularly through the cartoons, because we keep going back to these objects. And both he found and subsequently that the cartoons obviously were cut for the weavers. So a lot of the structural fault lines that he was describing in his condition reports were actually where they were reattached into objects that we now know, but obviously that they were made themselves as a sort of a form of non-object in a sense. They were designs for tapestries. There's a lot of debate about whether they were, I mean, the amount of work that he put into them, whether he intended them as finished objects. And so we keep returning to these objects and sort of turning up new information.
So it's like a fractal of an object, and the object isn't the object, it's the fractal.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I do.
Actually, did you know Mandelbrot called these simulated fractals cartoons?
Yeah.
The ones he did on a computer, like by coding them to things like that. Those were cartoons because the fractals for him were investigating the real world, like real objects in nature, like trees, landscapes, and the simulations of them figures were termed cartoons. Yeah.
Interesting. I didn't know that actually. Do you want to just mention the box that you're doing?
Well, my research is practice-led, so I'm making and hoping to make more objects. From working with the material that's generated through the cartoons, it's kind of worked back another new object, which has come back through me intervening in the material that's already existing. I'm also working on a project, because obviously these encounters with objects within the museum are always collective. When you go in, there's a group of you and you're working, so I'm very interested in how what are pretty much in the museum are systemic. They're about producing information, but I think there's far more to it than that, and so I'm interested in how what we call a duty of care to the object might be rethought as what Isabel Stengers describes as the care of the possible. So I don't think these are very stable objects. I think there's a lot there that seems to be bubbling away.
Great. Your work is dealing with care.
Yeah, I found that really interesting. Yeah. Care of the possible is, I mean, a repair not just as a static fix on an object, but something that enables it to flourish, to use an old-fashioned term, and makes room for kind of development in the future. I think there's some interesting projects around conservation of net art that come up against the similar sorts of problems, because the platforms that they were designed for are no longer operative, and they almost need to construct the environment in which the object can kind of flourish and develop and maintain its kind of interactivity. Yeah, we should
interesting. That's right. Samira.
Sandra?
Wait, sorry, did I cut you off? Were you going to say something more?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm taking a PhD. I'm doing a part-time. I'm a painter. I'm interested in the process of cutting, wounding, and becoming.
Great. Cutting, wounding, and becoming. I like this. Yeah. Good. And who are your main people that you're involved with?
Nietzsche, Schopenhauer.
Good. Those are a good bunch. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. And I'm on your committee, but so is Rob.
Yes.
Rob Anderson, who couldn't be here today. So interesting thing. Okay. Dane.
Dane Jonathan Barlow. My PhD research is entitled Figuring Algorithms and Immateriality, the undecidable iterations of digital arts practice.
I do love you. You're the only person that actually has memorized that title, and it's always the good title, and it's always right there with the colon. Okay, go on.
Essentially, it tries to. I'm trying to combine a Leibnizian conception of concepts and continuums and feeding that through what you might call the immateriality of fractals, dividing them into a rough kind of fractal dimension which is simultaneously empty but also occupied and full of difference and diversity.
And how does it show itself in your work?
I can show you actually. as it is.
Because your work is dealing with the sensuousness of...
I try to look at how aesthetics is visualised dimensionally, incompletely. It continuously generated. It requires a sort of a here and a nowness, but that here and nowness is also generated by what's running, the codes and how it's run, the speed it's run, how that process is generated through, again, fractal algorithms, I suppose. I'll show you one I'm working on at the moment. This is what you might call a flow field, which is generated through a fractal concept called Perlin noise, which sort of steps piece by piece through a two-dimensional space, picking certain values and
you guys are going to have to get
converts that value
Can
into...
you just turn around to the rest of it?
So it's essentially, when you run the program, it picks a value and it steps through a space which continually changes the value, but not in a large sort of jumps. They're very small jumps, so it's a sort of smooth transition, but that transition doesn't have to change in terms of a very specific order. It can literally move back and forth, but oscillates. It has sort of gaps in it. It can make large jumps, small jumps. It's got a room for sort of creating its own sense.
So there's an algorithm mapped over 2 dimensions? A single algorithm, or are there more? Is there one?
There's a number sort of going on. So there's the way in which they move, there's the way the colour is sort of chosen. Again, I'm using the Perlin noise algorithm, which essentially is a fractal based stepping through time, and the smaller step, choosing really small steps, so there's sort of a smoothness to it, so you can see how things are transitioning, but there's also it's being repeated like 3,000 times, so each point, there's 3,000 points on the screen at any one time, sort of flowing through, and those are continuously being moved in different ways, or the colours are slightly changing, so that work.
But to push Barnaby's, what I think is behind your question, or maybe that was your question, nothing behind it, but what I think is one of the things that's very interesting about your work is that you show how the algorithm itself is not a static or formula. It's itself based on the undecidability and the uncertainty principle of what's his face? Gödel, yeah.
Well, that goes into how code sort of embodies...
It's gone black.
How sort of code, formal systems, axiomatic systems, embody discourse, and how that discourse isn't just an anthropocentric discourse. It can incorporate light, all different kinds of matter, how it's exhibited, how you find, how you temporarily sort of connect with the work, how long you look at it, how, because you can step sort of in and out at any time, how do you how do you find a place to start?
But you've chosen it because the algorithm, any algorithm, exists both in completely in the perfect tense and in the way that you're presenting it here in the present tense.
Yes. It requires
it's injected its kind of temporality into its kind of into its conduct.
It requires
like
a running
like the reading of a book.
or a reading, in order to sort of open it up to really get it going.
So what would you say is the core part of the question that you're asking?
Really, I want to ask how is it that how does space, time, sort of become figural? And how does it matter in this sense of fractals and how as a manipulation of refolding, enfolding surfaces? How does that surface generate half a dimension, 2/3 of a dimension? How does it sort of occupy that space between dimensions? And in terms of how does that matter sort of come to matter in half spaces or half times?
So does string theory come into this? Are you gonna have are you gonna have like an nth dimension? You're gonna have like only 4th dimension or 5th dimension?
It's a different sort of dimension. Topological dimension is different sort of game, but yeah, I mean, if you want, you can definitely manipulate dimensions like that. Yeah. But I'm interested in how fractals as a dimensional that's in between sort of unfolds diversity in that betweenness, but it's not really between at all because it is a dimension of itself. It's just a strange.
So there's no in-betweenness, there's just...
So if you've got a fractal dimension of say 1.5, that half isn't just an in-between of 1 and 2, it is 1.5, it's a 1.5 dimension and it has its own ways of working, its way of producing aesthetics or matterings.
Any questions?
Yeah, I never saw any of this kind of work of you exhibited. How would you exhibit it?
Well, with work like this, it requires a sort of a big dark space because there's lots of small bits. Like I said, there's 3,000 little points going at once. So in order to get sort of the idea of the wholeness of how it's creating these fields, these flows, and how these little bits are sort of coming together to make that sort of thing work, it requires that way to show two different things at the same time. And also there's the issue of, because I program my work in open source software, so the code that generates it is through an open source program, so anything about how do you show the code, do you make it sort of openly available for people to sort of recreate, to sort of manipulate. And in terms of, like, this is just one work, my work focuses on sort of an interactivity. Do you know that a viewer to interrupt the work in another way? So those are the different sort of aspects to what you might call digital art.
Also, how much information do you want to give on the side? Because like, I think also would be what you were saying. Like, as an ignorant that I am, if I know nothing, if I read no label, I would not know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
There could be any animation.
Yeah, exactly. And
so I'm curious to know like how you frame it. Because
yeah, I think the important thing is that it's not seen as a video, it's seen as it's something that is being run, and if you run it a different time, it will produce something different, slightly different, significantly different in how.
So you could video that?
Yeah, you definitely could, but
Or you can live map it, so you can.
But what does that mean?
It means that you can alter it on your computer whilst it's running.
Oh right, yeah.
You can run it in different shapes and different formats.
But I'm more interested myself in just sort of letting things sort of go into the world and do its own thing.
Is it doing its own thing when you're not? I mean, is it out there somewhere doing this anyway, or is it only when you set it?
It could be, but it has to require a computer to sort of leave it to run at some point.
I'm wondering, with the new Google things that are showing up, the holograms.
IOs, deep learning.
Yeah,
stuff.
what do you think about that? Would that have some sort of implication? You know, where you just pull it on the screen and you just have it there. Would that? Because it wouldn't need a screen then. Anyway, that's just another question.
Yeah, it requires some form of materiality to process, to work. It has to work as a work of art.
Mm-hmm.
That's the working. That's Turing.
So it's an inside-out condition report.
Mm.
It's an inverse condition.
It's just that the way you approach the work of art as art. Yeah, you do like art that actually works in a very literal sense.
Like plowing the field.
Well, it is working. It's doing a job, which is growing in some direction. But somehow the way you frame that, I don't think requires any viewer. Like there's no interest in any encounter, any viewer, anything, because that could be online, and there could be a computer doing the process, I guess, and a website keeping that available to anyone.
Yeah, you could upload it to a website and you could just go to the page and it would be there.
No, I just wanted to stress, the fact that
it's a very important question.
It can exist.
Your work of art, and it means
work of art.
No, the way in which you see the artwork doing its own work has nothing to do with what I see, for instance, like absolutely zero. And I just wanted to stress this. And it's interesting because we probably read similar people where we just go into tangents.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, it's kind of the age-old question: if a tree fell in the forest and no one saw it, did it actually fall? And my position has always been yes.
Also reminds me a bit of Jem Finer's Long Player project.
Which is what?
It's an algorithm launched to control sound files and mix them into each other, streamed over the internet, launched in 2000. The combination of sound files and the algorithm means that the music won't repeat itself, the sounds won't repeat itself for
1,000 years. Yeah, that's right.
So it's been going for, I think it's still going. But I'm pretty sure people haven't been tuned in, enthusiastically for the last 16 years. But allegedly it's still going and will keep going until the internet breaks.
It wasn't going up to this Greenwich when I visited it.
It wasn't.
When was that?
2 years ago.
Okay, so it was a good 8 years ago.
It's so funny.
But that's really important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because as you were saying before, all of this requires maintenance and repair. You can't. It's not just about putting this thing up there and it goes on. All of these systems have to be maintained.
Yeah. Interesting. So one of the things that's coming out of this group right now is this question of how one understands care and the relation of care to art, that kind of thing. I mean, when we finally get to you, you're going to get into the archive and so on, right? Okay, thanks, Dan. That's good. Joe.
Hi, I'm Jo. I'm currently teaching on a BA Art and Education course at Newman University.
At Newman?
Yeah, which is it's in the south of Birmingham.
How are you liking it?
Southwest of Birmingham, sorry.
How do you like it?
It's been a bit crazy, actually.
Yeah, we won't go any further.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's good. It's fine.
I think it's calmer, actually, because I used to be really lazy when I was a teacher in school. And now I'm teaching teachers, and I have to be really on the ball.
It's hard, isn't it? Moment of silence.
My PhD, I'm looking at art practices that call themselves pedagogic or have pedagogy in them in some sense, and I'm kind of looking now at some pedagogic projects that aren't really. They kind of do that, but they are not successful in that pedagogic kind of thing.
Well, this actually connects to the research that you're proposing right now, right? About the whole way in which, what is it about the national curriculum, which we don't even have to go there, that is turning people off to art. People like, the people between the ages of 0 and 22, they're just not going to art. And that's one of your, that's part of what your research is. So you two could, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm also still looking at a project that Heather and Ivan Morrison did at a school in Peckham, and how they don't really approach it in a sense of pedagogy, but actually kind of is.
Interesting. And do you think that there's a difference between how it is in this region, in the West Midlands and the Midwest, in the West Midlands, and in southeast London? Do you think there's a difference? Or do you think each region has a sort of a character or tone to it, or do you think that it's got the same problem nationally?
I think that, you mean in terms of the curriculum? And
well, pedagogy, what you're looking at.
Yeah, there's big clusters of kind of people who are really kind of trying to develop the curriculum in a more critical sense for school or for young people. And then there are other people who just teach art, and that's what they do, and it's not their interest, it's just their job. So
interesting.
there's a lot of debate at the moment.
Any more questions, Joe?
I did some work with QR codes where you could scan in, like to encourage young people to use their phones, because I know they like to be on their phones all the time, and so to engage them in the project, you could scan in the QR code and get like the backstory or a video or something of the piece of art. And that's kind of a really immediate way to make kids look at art. Because I know my son will go round, if I say there's an app at this museum, he'll be like, oh good, okay, yeah, I'll come. But if there's no app, then he's not interested.
That's interesting. Yeah. God.
They did a Pokemon Go catching thing around BMF as well recently.
Say it again?
They did a big Pokemon Go event.
Oh yeah, right, yeah.
Quite recently as well. So I think there'd be like, Snorlaxes hiding behind schools and stuff. So I think that probably
brings them in, yeah.
But people see art that way, where there's no Alexa behind. Like,
it's okay. It's been a very eye-opening session for you so far.
yeah.
Okay, thanks, Joe. James.
My name's James. I just finished the MA last month.
Last month.
And yes, so I've been using overheard conversation and projecting it in architectural spaces, but also speaking overheard conversations and recording them through stethoscopes, and then hiding those speakers behind the walls in architectural spaces. In terms of research, I'm not quite sure where it fits, but I'm trying to figure it out. So yeah.
Do you want to say a little bit about, we were talking about care of the self and stuff like, you want to talk about any of that, the penetrated atmosphere, penetrated body, penetrated, I don't want to talk about this.
I think I just need a bit more time.
Okay, that's a no. Okay. Okay, David, we talked about your work, right? Did you want to add anything else?
No, probably not, no.
Okay.
My name's Anna Rutter. I started my PhD part-time last February, so I don't know, on a quarter of a year through in full-time terms or something like that. My working title early on was Gathering the Everyday Towards a New Understanding of Effect and Embodied Encounter in Non-Narrative Sound Installation. It's a sort of a fluctuating title, so I'm not saying that's still the title, but it's somewhere around there. And practice-based, and I'm gathering and building an archive of sounds and also bits of footage, film, imagery. I'm working on a couple of projects that hopefully will sort of have outcomes as exhibitions next year.
And the piece you did at the V&A, what can you describe that?
Oh,
I
with Stan's Caff, I made a piece. We were asked to make a piece for the David Bowie Years exhibition 4 years ago.
Yeah. I mentioned that because I think that piece, which was quite an amazing piece, you're very modest about this, but it seems to me to have had some sort of resonance in what your PhD has now started to pick up?
I think I think there's elements that I've looked at for a long time. I tend to generally believe that making art is an obsessive, compulsive activity. It's not necessarily something you absolutely decide. And I think there are themes and things that come up over quite long periods of time. I'd worked with stands for a number of years, sort of 10 years ago or so, and I think there were themes and things that both James Yarker and I are both interested in that had sort of come up in a number of things that we'd done. So I think there are things about, for me, about gathered, remediated, re-looking at, re-exploring sort of everyday things that I think actually I probably can look back to my degree 20 years ago and see elements of. So I think there are probably things that come all the way through, but the sort of research I'm looking at now, I suppose, has come into some more solid form over the last sort of 3-4 years.
Yeah, interesting. I'm just going to take a slight break because we have our Director of Research. And Joshua, would you like to introduce yourself and your work and say whatever you'd like to say?
I'm sorry, I'm late and I was picking up kids because my wife works in the university as well. We've got the research committee. Are you not part of the research committee over in Parkside?
Oh,
so she was called up.
Was there a meeting?
And she called me, can you rescue the kids? And so I ran off and did that. Yeah.
I might be part of that meeting, but okay, anyway.
And you found your excuse to...
Yes, here's my excuse. Anyway.
And my name's Joshua Jia. I'm Professor of Chinese Art and I'm Head of Research here. And I'm being here because this is their first seminar this year, so I just want to say hello to all the students, particularly new PhDs, and welcome to this wonderful School of Art.
Great, thank you. I mean, can people just say their names very quickly so you have a face and a name stuck together?
Ed. You know me? Thea?
Yeah.
Ivan.
Hi.
Others.
Sarah.
Hello.
Sophie.
Simon.
Yeah, we met in the M3C.
In the M3C, that little cohort there, yeah.
Hello.
Dane.
Hi. I know you.
I know you. No.
Yeah.
A German.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mark. Barnaby.
Yeah.
Alberta.
I think you know we know.
James is in the back.
Yes. Hi.
Joe
Hi.
and Anna.
Obviously, my student is missing from this group.
Yeah, I
check with her.
That's right.
Yeah.
And
this is open to all PhDs.
It's open to all PhDs, but I have to say that I think that the latest email went out basically to the CCAR group. This is that group.
Right. Maybe you don't have. I
don't
to double
have
check
everybody.
with
Yeah, if you can send it to me because
the new list.
I don't have the new list.
Yeah. Okay.
Great.
Right.
That's part of the problem. Okay.
Yeah.
But
I think it's going to be another 7-8.
Oh, great.
Coming in this year.
Excellent. Good. And Jakob.
Hello.
Did you already introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been here
Excellent.
for 4 years.
Just saying. Good. Does anybody have any questions for Joshua? Excellent.
So are you?
We were just going around introducing ourselves, and we're just about done. But you're welcome to stay for that bit.
Yeah, I can stay for a little bit because I just parked my car outside and that's it. I just use full of it.
Excellent.
You don't have your children in it, do you?
No.
Okay, Emily.
I'm Emily Sparks. I
No pressure, just because the director's here.
Yeah, I finished MA Queer Studies Arts and Culture last year, and now I'm going into the second year of PhD. I paint. I have a residency at the BMAG at the moment that will last until January. And then I kind of started off PhD thinking a lot about what a tableau vivant is and what use that could be with thinking about painting. Like traditionally it's been when it's kind of like an artsy charade where you act out what the painting can be.
Did you say Nazi charades?
Artsy.
Oh, artsy.
She said artsy.
Good, I'm glad that we're on this end. It gets distorted by the time it gets over here.
Yeah, not Nazis. Yeah, and but more recently, I think everything's taken a bit of a turn for for the better, and I'm thinking a lot about virtual reality software. And I've started using Tilt Brush, which Google released, which is basically just it's painting software to use in virtual reality. So you would use it on the HTC Vive, so you would wear the headset for it, and your handheld controllers, one turns into a palette, but it's kind of a very you can do all kinds of things with it, and a paintbrush, I suppose. And it means you could paint in glue, and you could sit inside it and things like that. So if I'm thinking about what painting is in relation to a tableau vivant and the changing of dimensions and things like that, it's kind of quite interesting.
Did you print it out in 3D printing, do you think?
No.
Yeah, it's like really dodgy. I mean, there's there was a show at Somerset House, and there's a guy called Matthew Stone. Did you see that?
Yeah.
No, I was doing that the other week
Yeah.
as well, and I was talking to the guys that programmed it, and they were saying that it's incredibly difficult to, at the moment, it's not quite there.
So. I mean, because you just don't get it, do you, when it's...
Well, the scanning has to be so precise. That's the difficulty.
Well, it doesn't produce a material form, does it? Isn't it changing?
Yeah, and it's weird too if you think about, I mean, I obviously still use kind of like a messy traditional studio, you could say, but then it's interesting too in relation to that because it means you could keep expanding your studio, and this studio itself becomes a bit weird and you can't quite grasp it, or maybe you can in a different way, I don't really know. And Matthew Stone, he was using this kind of software, but he, I think he made his own software, like 7 different types or something. He kept translating it through and through and through, and then he ended up printing it off. And in the end, what it looked like was almost like, it looks like a cast, almost, of the person. He kind of produces things that look kind of similar to what I make, in fact, that he kind of uses these traditional looking poses, painting poses, but then he's kind of trapped it in this VR, so it's kind of an odd thing. So I'm searching for the people who make work like that, and
Is that part of Bjork Digital?
Pardon?
Is that part of the Bjork Digital thing at Somerset House?
No, I think it was just before. It's part of the Utopia project, which I don't know which still running, it might be over, but I want to see the Bjork thing.
Yeah, good. Jakob?
I have a pre-prepared statement.
You have a pre-prepared statement? Wow.
Not because I don't know many things, but there's yeah. Anyway, so here we go. So good. Affinity. It was recorded here, so
Affinity.
It's recorded in this room. That's hilarious.
Finitude of time. I'm working on a concept right now that looks at how practices of sexual difference can allow us to produce a type of materiality that exists and makes sense in an offbeat tempo. I'm looking at sadomasochism and practices of glory hole sex, and I argue...
That was enough. Censored now. Okay.
Sorry. Huh? Wait. That was censorship. And that was me doing Wookiee. No. The sound of Wookiee, the creature from Star Wars.
I'm looking at sadomasochism and practices of glory hole sex, and I argue...
No.
So what do you argue?
Is this censored?
No, it's not censored.
Argue that through those one can experience, as Freeman argues, a deviant pause.
Elizabeth Freeman.
A type of temp.
I don't know what's happening.
It's a deviant pause.
Deviant. It's exactly deviant pause, but unintentional, which is okay. What the hell is happening with my life?
Probably just low
Yeah.
bandwidth on the Wi-Fi.
Let me give a second.
Reality that does not belong to chrononormative.
Okay, let me just pause it for a little bit. But basically, it's not belongs to chrononormativity, but it's
talk together.
to the mundane.
Yet at the same time, it's very much embedded into our lives. As a film.
1 second. By the way, I love the way this video is playing right now because I think it makes more sense. And it should be watched with pausing and bad connection. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Filmmaker and for
No, it just doesn't want to work. Let me just put it on a lower setting. Yeah, oh. No?
Do you need more electricity or different?
No, it's not electricity, it's a Wi-Fi.
As a filmmaker and photographer, I'm looking at how slicing of the time can allow us to produce a different sensuality of the body, a different way of physically knowing time without finitude, without death, can produce a new sensual sense of knowledge.
Doesn't make sense, does it?
It does make sense, but it's a little difficult to make sense of it as it keeps.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us now that we've got sort of the back band?
Well, when I kind of started my last year now, so, and then it's going to be another last year. I'm going to be forever in last year, but no, this kind of grew up from I started working on, my initial kind of thought of my research was to kind of find a different way of talking about something without thinking behind or under or hidden or kind of the Foucault's confession motives that everything, the kind of power is built on, maybe find alternative, not against per se this system, but alternative. I really try to find things that are not against something, not something, but rather its own body. But I was trying to first looking at palimpsests, which is material, then there is a hidden in it, embedded in it, and I was kind of looking at the connections between the hidden and the revealed. Then I kind of thought, oh, let's argue the layers, the notion of layers, the way we think layers. Every time there is something we faced with something, we think layers. Even though there is no layers, we think there is something behind it. There is a notion of how we read, how we approach things, which I kind of got annoyed with. So I researched that and I tried to think about more, how I call it, incestuous connections. Incestuous in the sense, space building connections that create a kind of certain type of temporal bubble. And I refer to that bubble as home, as a kind of certain type of mess and certain type of space that does not create patriarchal system of any sort, but allows for mixture of everything, from simple mixture of everything to the extent of not being recognized, something not being recognizable as something and being recognized as something else. So there's slippage, there is expansion, there is I don't know, sex and tea and fart and music, but basically all those things without putting one over the other, but rather kind of finding the body of it. And so that's when I got to it, and then I started thinking, because I was thinking of that, I started thinking of how that affects temporality and a sense of temporality in a body, in a how that affects temporal body, you could call it temporal body, and the kind of certain entanglements that create this body. I was trying to make a form out of it, trying to make material out of it. It failed. I wrote a paper about shaky hands and the fact that one loses oneself when one does research. and it's necessary not to have the eye. And why is the eye so pointless when one does research? But that brings to the Barat the kind of the interactions, basically, when the identity is not a pre-given thing that allows for subject to be and to know, but rather becomes something out of fluxus and out of I don't want to say activity because that sounds childish, but at the same time maybe it's good, but through the activity.
So how does the research then connect with your artwork, or how does your artwork? I mean, they're entangled, obviously, but I mean, how?
Yeah, that's the kind of. I think it was a little bit Bataille, the CFAR, the losing of one's head, and kind of bringing that. I did a series of busts, which I kind of on the first year when I tried to remove my head or the head of any form and shape. Then I started slicing of the videos in between parts, delaying things, speeding up things. So I started trying to this, in a sense, I think there is a sense of disowning of the body. I'm trying to shake it up through my work, this body. And I go into, there's lots of problems with it because this body is this body. It has a certain political and social connotation to it, attached as it's portrayed as it is, without me trying to give that to it. So that's the kind of complication of it. But I perform, I do videos. In my performances, I do readings. I like to call readings because I think articulation of any way, it's kind of sensual way of embodiment that makes something. So I articulate a lot. I read a lot out loud for that purposes, and I'm very bad at it because I get nervous, I interrupt, I mess words around, which is very interesting. I work with multiplicity, so I try to multiply things. I work a little bit with mapping of the spaces. I started trying to map the spaces, actual physical spaces, which then I'm not going to use. But doing things allows me to think. So, for example, the shaky hands, the ones of losing yourself, it was the fact that I kept dropping my 3D printed, not really model of method.
And then your computer was stolen. So
then my computer was stolen, which is great.
But I mean, I guess what I'm really asking, and what all of us, because you're in the final stretch, and a number of you are in the final stretch, what would you say at this point? You know, you came in with a project, you came in with a set of research questions. It's gone through this kind of mix and so on. What is your hunch now about what is your research question, or what is your contribution? What do you see it as?
You see, I have a trouble with that because there is a question if I'm following what I'm doing and I kind of allow it to be, or kind of making it and thinking it and being it and becoming it, there's a kind of danger of claiming anything out of it, because the process of hiding and revealing, which was the layering, which I argue is very layering, like it creates a notion of truth or universal truth of some sort, and that is not.
So that's your claim.
So that's a kind of that's a kind of claim that could be one of the claims, I think. But the point is, that's when the problem becomes that's when the issue becomes how the thesis will be and what is the thesis, and kind of rethinking the material of it. So even to that extreme, but to think of if there is a claim in the thesis as clearly stated that this is the claim, then it kind of then rest of the thesis becomes a hiding material for the truth, and it should rather, let's go back to embodiment, it rather should articulate this kind of sensual embodiment of what is happening and what did happen is happening, what is the node of the network of the relations or interactions that made the thesis or made the knowledge, rather than trying to claim that there is knowledge in it that's hidden in some way or another. So that's when I'm kind of struggling with, and I try to do that by intertwining the poetics, the academic, the artworks in between things, together with things. So partially I'm also working on a series of videos that's going to be part of my, there's going to be one big video from it, a series of it, I don't know what's going to be. But there is a video part of my thesis, so there is a written component, there's a video component, and there are artworks components. So there are three elements, three submissions for the final. That's what makes sense in my head.
Any questions for Jakob?
Have you heard of The Severed Head by Julia Kristeva?
Yeah, I have the...
Have you got the book?
Yeah, I have the... I have lots of books. And a lot of them I have... By the way, I don't know, because I liked paper things, so but yeah, I have quite a few texts from her, that's from my master's even. Oh, right. But coming to this, even I took with it, it's a PDFs, like printed PDFs, so...
Okay, because I just got the book, I can lend it to you.
That's good.
It's got really nice pictures in as well.
Nice pages. I like nice pages. Yes.
Sarah, what were you going to ask?
A really, really practical question. There's been some confusion about sort of what the actual final submission looks like, certainly when we sort of did our induction. And you've talked about those three sort of pieces, but you know, the text element, how big is that?
Well, we agree. I had the conversations with my supervisors. You need to have a conversation with your supervisors when you do that. And it changes, because originally I thought it's going to be half and half, and now it's half, and more. So that's how it's going to look like. I don't know how...
You normally have to have 40,000 words.
Yeah, it's between, well, they say 40, between 40 to 50. Yeah, 40, 60. 40 to 60, so you can so you do have a little bit of wedge around there. I have the kind of practice, which is part practice, which allows me to speak through the research in a sense, and then there is a video part which does, in a way, does the research. Can I say that? I don't know if it makes sense.
I know what you mean.
But there is a third element, and it's crucial, not because of narrative of what the thesis is gonna be, but because they need to be all of them together. Yeah. So I also have videos that are not there. I call it heterotopias because I love Foucault, but also love you. But too much. I literally listen to him on my MP3 player, which is hilarious. He pronounces the self the best way possible, and he's like, the self. It's like amazing. He has a lecture from France. Yeah. Anyway, it was brilliant. The self. Yeah, the kind of so I need to entangle them three, and that's why I do have a structure. Like I have my chapters outlines, and I have little paragraphs to each element of it. I decided to slice it as much as possible, which is for me.
In many cases, you will find 40k words is very difficult. I mean, it's too less. It's not too much.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, you will find really difficult to conclude and reinterpret what you're trying to argue within the limit, within 40k. It's normally you're going to say 50, 60k. That's my experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, mine was...
It takes a lot of time to be brief.
Yeah. Mine plan
you don't have a lot of time.
My plan suggests like 55 something at this point, but I will cut it slightly because there is an introduction and conclusion part, which I don't have included yet at this point.
Thank you. Okay, Jamu.
So I'm Jamu. I'm a photographic artist. I do kind of lots of work around kind of the black male body and pleasure, that kind of stuff. I'm an archivist as well, and I'm doing the PhD part time. And basically I will be looking at kind of I'm archiving, and I'm a role of kind of the sensuousness and caring into like a kind of archive. And so for me kind of I think like I'm caring, and for archive like I'm bringing the notion of pleasure, and I'm intimacy as well. So that's kind of one of the kind of areas I want to kind of
Have you thought through at all, thinking about Simon's work on preservation, the relation between, let's say, archiving and preservation? You know, like, because when I think of preservation, often, not the way you're doing it, but often it's like holding it and getting it solid and stuck in a, you know, in a book. Cold. And and when you're talking about the archiving, you have the sensuous, you know, you're having, so is there a conversation?
Well, basically, I'm as an archivist, it's both those things. I'm part of it is around kind of I'm caring, preserving the archive, but then also for me it's saying about kind of also kind of not what an archive is, but you know what the archive is actually doing as well. So then, that's the bit I'm kind of more kind of concerned about, is what I'm going on, and then I'm also how I'm to then can create kind of a queer archival method that then brings in notion of the sensuous and pleasure and so on and so forth.
And did you talk about that when you did a New York?
Yes, this summer's been amazing, I have to say that. I'm bragging. Yes, I'm bragging actually.
Okay, so you've been shown around the world. Okay, we'll get past that.
Yes, so basically in March, I spent 4 weeks with visual aids, which is an archive. I feel like I'm artist and I'm activist who are like I'm living all around, passed on with HIV and AIDS, and then my workshop was around like people bringing things that they kind of kept around their kind of identities, things that they kind of not shared publicly, and so basically I'm part of me is I'm curious around what are the things that won't make the archive, or a kind of official kind of narratives around kind of heritage and so on and so forth. And then usually those like black, queer, non-gender conformed kind of narratives and experiences. And so basically the workshop then was about people to bring out those private stuff, you know, love letters, sex toys, and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, Derrida has this whole argument around the archive and the frivolousness of the archive and the whole question of whether or not the archive is dead or it's alive or it's doing something else. Listening to you, it sounds like you're using the archive as a 3D version of telling the story, or of inventing the story.
Yeah. Well, basically, I think like I'm archives are based on some idea of truth, but actually there is a no space in kind of archives that I know for fiction, and I can reimagine people's stories. And I'm just something like those kind of things I'm kind of flirting with around the archive moment. And so for me, it is about kind of around living archive, and then the soundtrack to the archive would be like funk music. And so basically, if you think about James Brown and Parliament or whatever, right? Yes, there is a certain rhythm to that, but then actually funk also means dirty and smelly as well, and so that's kind of where I want to kind of get into the archive.
So the archive, any archive, always has a kind of queer relationship with intimacy itself. This sort of ordering and structuring, and yet like with a mission to probe completely and explore every single aspect of somebody's work, life, whatever it is. The two things kind of seem to be slightly. There's a tension between the two things, it is kind of almost a sort of like a prurience, kind of queer prurience, the establishment of an archive. I think it's quite interesting, isn't it? To then take that and head into that direction.
When we've spoken before, I love the way that the archive comes together is it perform. You have a party in your house, and people bring objects. Somebody's cooking. People are going through bags of stuff. I mean, that's, for me, as someone who comes from a museum, that's actually really exciting. Because it's
not really come from a museum.
Well, I feel like
it's been let out of the V&A. Welcome here.
And it really makes me think of Whitehead's idea of the self-enjoyment of occasions. When all occasions are almost looking to enjoy themselves. And you've managed to find a way of doing that, which is really quite impressive.
Yes, so that's the space I'm playing.
That's you.
At the moment, yeah.
Any other questions for Ajamu? Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a postdoc, primarily an artist, which gives me a bit of a let out for always doing my philosophy reading. Try. Early in the summer I did a residency and it was very short. It was supposed to be, it was designed as a lab, but you had to have an exhibition at the end of it. And although it was outwardly successful, it gave me a real jolt and realised I'd been actually rather lazy and complacent and lacking in focus. So since then I've been trying to write a formal postdoctoral research proposal, which is now in about draft 13. But it's looking at, my research subject is borders and transitory spaces, and I'm looking at how sound and light, for example, on the person alters and changes and is perceived in these border spaces. So from that I've done another residency which was very strange. It was art and sailing, and the idea of the resident was to look at place from the space of the water.
I want that residency.
It was very good, it was very stormy.
Okay,
The only way
I
to
don't
do
want
it
that.
was to get up at 6 o'clock because the boat was never level. It was either like that or like that. So basically it was standing upright, but the boat was. But it was very good. I learnt more about sailing than art probably. And I'm still processing all the things from that. And last weekend I did a course in what was almost like dirty electronics, sort of building synthesizers and using light to stimulate the sound that from the synthesizer. And so I'm trying to build more things that I can use in trying to put it all together really. And I'm not quite sure where I'm going, but I know that there's somewhere in the back of my mind there's some sort of idea that's sort of wiggling through. And I had to go and buy a new soldering iron.
This past weekend I just came back. I was at the Venice Biennale, which is the architecture biennale, and they had a whole thing on borders and the architecture of space and the architecture of nomadism and this question of the migrancy and so on. And that was a major theme. If you have a chance, I would suggest going online.
I have had a quick look actually. Yeah.
Good.
But I haven't spent an awful lot of time.
I think it'll resonate with what your work is about.
Yeah. I sort of like the idea that sound and light, they're not really contained, even though you think you might contain light, you actually can't.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also all the sort of thing of how you exhibit these things. So it's sort of, I've done a huge amount of visual research this summer in lots and lots of different places. So basically I'm just trying to formalise my, at the moment, rather simplistic questions.
Good. Draft 13 sounds about right, that's good.
Yeah, I think I've got another 13 to come.
Okay, last but not least.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Mark Walker. I've got a PhD in philosophy. My thesis title was Experiential Embodiment, Human Immediacy, Dawn as Negative Affinity. Johnny was my supervisor. So I have this doctorate in philosophy, and for BCU I'm a mentor, for BSA I'm a researcher and tutor, and I'm just starting as an associate lecturer and do a bit of supervision at Camberwell.
That's great.
Yeah. So I have this world, this academic world, but I'm also an artist and a musician. It's another world. And I have this other world where for the past 9 months, 2 days a week, I've been doing voluntary work at Abacus Furniture Project, which is part of West Kent Housing, where we recycle furniture. So I have these 3 worlds, very different. One's very academic and mental, one's very physical, very different world. They have their own kind of formal rationalities, practical systems, way of going about things. They have very kind of different matrices of language and how they produce things, how they produce bodies, how they produce things. Very different axes of knowledge and power and ethos. These 3 different worlds. I'm generalising the problematic of the subject really simply. I'm holding it apart. Obviously they overlap, or they can be embodied, or they can be junk, or you could use another word, or tangled, or whatever. I want to stay away from that. So I have these 3 worlds. This is where I practice my circumspect concern and solicitude, my forbearance and considerativeness. When people ask me what I do, I just usually say I'm a philosopher and I'm a furniture humper. I say, is it good? Yes, I say this is good, this is great, because I have the mental discipline and I have the physical discipline as well. I kind of leave out the art, which kind of it's a bit of both. And if I look at them and I think if I can get away with it, I will say, yes, so there's good philosophical precedents for this. Placer wrote a couple of books last year, and Alcibiades, where I talk about discipline of the body and discipline of the mind. Then if I look at them again and think I can get away with it, I would say, well, actually, it's more like a stylistics of existence, an appreciation of the soul. And I look at them again, if I think I can get away with it, I'll then start talking about stylistics of life and an aesthetic ethos. And of course, once you start talking about life as an aesthetic and as an ethos, this is very vague, very indeterminate. The conversation can go anywhere. So it might go into, say, your contributions to a community, or it might talk about your relation to the inhuman or something like that. But I think at the back of it is kind of what kind of community you can belong to, and also what to do with your loneliness. And I think I'll stop there on my head.
Interesting. Any questions for Dr. Mark?
Philip Glass had on the musical side, Philip Glass had a furniture removal, his own company for a time when he was subbing his ensemble in the mid-70s. I think him and Steve Reich might have been furniture removal now.
Very good at precedent. Okay, you need a break? Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll finish the seminar.
Yeah.
We're back. The way the seminar has worked in the past, and I'm hoping that it will continue more or less in that way. No, I'm just starting playing with it. Is that the group that finishes the seminar proposes what the next year is going to be about, because we've gone through a whole year of head bashing and thinking things through. The way the seminar works is that there are different texts that we look at, but you read those texts through your work. So it's not just meant to be a contemplative in the boring sense of the word, or in the dry sense of the word. It's meant to have. Here, just pass that to.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's right. Just pass it, Joshua. It's just meant to have a different. If you give it to Sarah. Let's try it again.
Sorry?
That's right. That's for you as well.
Okay.
Okay, we're back. Anyway, last year we really looked at Deleuze's notion of difference and the image of thought. Basically, is what we spent the entire year looking at how this didn't work, how it was infused with this question of logic of sense, and the sense that we looked at had to do with the various notions of series and so on, and people brought their works to it and so on. You're expected as newbies in the group, you're expected to be part of that. This is a long conversation. Some of you will not understand a thing that's going on. Hopefully it's not the second and third years. Some of you will find yourself at odds with it. That's great. There's always the basic position of any kind of critical environment is that all criticism is given with love. It's not none of this jugular thing or anything like that, although sometimes it gets quite heated, as we all know, which is great. But it's all in the spirit of getting us together and to think things through. So that's how we ended up with the notion of exquisite methods as being the driving feature of this year, and that it was in line with the overarching theme for the center being radical matter. And radical matter in terms of art, philosophy, the wild sciences, and so on. And what people wanted to look at was Karen Barad's work in particular. And in particular, of Karen Barad's work, Meeting the Universe Halfway, and of course the book that isn't Karen Barad's work, but I claimed was Karen Barad's work, which is by Donna Haraway, called Staying with the Trouble. And the particular piece was Tentacular Thinking. And it gets one into thinking about the Anthropocene and what she calls the capital Pathene, or something, I don't even know how to pronounce it.
No, I don't know.
And then the one that is completely unpronounceable, which I'll give to you. This one here.
Cthulhu.
She made it up.
Cthulhu.
It comes from
H.P. Lovecraft.
It comes from what?
H.P. Lovecraft. a monster.
No, she says it doesn't.
Yeah, she says.
She says it's not the monster. She spelled it differently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
But it
She
looks
says
very
it's in a
well.
Already there's disagreement. You see how well you did that with love? That's excellent. Okay. Okay. So whenever you are, whenever we're going to be discussing things, always remember to connect it with whatever page numbers, whatever, so you have in your head really the sources. It's not just your opinion, however fabulous your opinion might be. You are connecting it always back to the way in which you can make an argument. So that's part of the pedagogical approach here. I guess my first question is, are you happy with that as a way to go forward? Are you still happy with this? Okay. Does anybody have another text that they'd like to read? So we'll have Karen Barad as the main dinner, and then is there anything alongside this that you also want to look at? Good. I would like to suggest logic of sense. I think that we didn't really get through that, or at least the question of series, unless you want to like knife in the head with that.
Could we do cyborg bodies? I don't know if you've done that.
No, we haven't done cyborg. We could do cyborg bodies.
Okay.
Yeah. Would people like to do that?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, people. Okay. Okay, we can definitely put this on. And the idea, of course, always is to be thinking what it is to do the method. To do a method, any method. Is there a method? Do we work against a method? And at the moment, anyway, the reason that we've gone with Barad is because she is, of course, accessing complexity and multidimensionality in a way that dislodges a different form of reason, which gets away from dialectics. So that's more or less why that's gone in. And it means really also bringing in some of Stenger's work. We could look at also...
Plotnitsky.
Sorry?
Plotnitsky.
We could look at Plotnitsky, yeah. We could look at...
complementarity.
Yeah, we could look at complementarity.
Might be kind of, it might be, I haven't read the book, but it might be doubling up a little bit, but it also might be isolating some of the most interesting, dynamics.
There's also Prigogine, who is quite good. I mean, he and Stengers were having the whole debate on complexity. It's just that it's how to give you a bit of a grounding, as it were, a bit of something, so you're not just floating in the ocean, just coming up with concepts and just throwing them to and fro. It's really understanding how this operates, because if you're going to steal from different systems, you need to know that you're bringing in a whole Trojan horse. So, and what you're bringing in. It's pretty much as simple as that. And it always is fed through your work, how you rethink the work. So, shall we at least start with meeting the universe halfway? And every week there'll be 2 or 3 of you that'll be volunteered to present. And you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be a horrific presentation, but something that you've thought through so that people, and I'm assuming that everybody reads the work. And if you don't read the work, you must learn how to look like you have read the work. Okay, it's a very crucial skill in being a postdoc, a doc. Okay, so Dane, why don't you kick off with Haraway?
Haraway?
Mm-hmm. Barad.
Should I leave this?
No, take it.
This is for me.
Yeah, it was for you. It was for you to give to Yan Yan.
To Yan Yan.
To for the ref.
All right. Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
See you.
Okay.
See you.
And are you getting? Make sure you're getting a glass of wine at the end of the seminar.
Never. We're workhorses here.
All right. Okay.
So see you. Okay. That was great, Jakob. I thought you did a great job.
At what?
At being the one that had to bring in the Q word. Excellent. Very good.
Well, it scares people away. It's easier that way.
Perfect.
You don't have to say that much about what you do. I can imagine my commission just like, okay, thank you. There you go.
Excellent. Is there anything anybody wants to raise before we go on to this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you were saying that you were in the debate about the tree, the falling tree, if it exists or not, if anyone looks. Are you sure about your answer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I think it's a stupid question, like because it just follows this dichotomy of objectivity and subjectivity. That
No, it
if
doesn't.
no, like I would say
Why would it follow that?
Well, because it's like if you have someone seeing it, looking at it, that would be like the subject. That sounds like...
Not necessarily.
Hmm?
Now, you were just saying to Dane that his work only lives if it's being observed.
No.
Oh, okay, I misheard you then.
No. I said
Did you
that
hear
his
that?
work doesn't need anyone to say it. It's not thought like the way in which his artwork works. It's in a literal way. It builds up. It creates itself.
Yes, but in saying that, it sounded like you were saying it therefore wasn't really art.
No, therefore.
Did you hear that way? No. Did anybody hear it that way? I just heard it that way. That's excellent.
Well, no.
I'm in my paranoid mode.
No. Well, like I just said that actually I look at it in a totally different way, and so that would not make sense for the way in which I see the artwork works. But I didn't jump to conclusion. I just said that he constructs something that works, that doesn't require anyone to see it, and for me, an artwork doesn't exist in its own.
But you need an observer to make it an artwork? Is that what you're saying?
No, because I would say that the artwork is actually it's not the result of pre-existing artwork and pre-existing observer, but it's something that is another kind of ontology, described in another kind of ontology. That's why I was thinking that also in terms of Mattering and Barad, it would not make sense to not even to consider the question of the tree, because it implies a tree falling and a spectator.
No, it's exactly the reverse. It doesn't imply a spectator. Whatever the tree does is irrelevant to whether or not there's a spectator there.
Okay, it's just that probably so my hearing of that was that.
Good. I'm glad I've shifted the blame onto you.
Yeah, no. my hearing
Much better now.
my hearing of that was that usually this question is like, do you believe in subjectivity or do you believe in things that exist like in an objective state?
No, neither of them.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
I just thought that because of the metaphor is about someone looks at it. It really reminds me of modernity, sort of a frame.
But
so
it comes back to what you were suggesting, which needs more clarification then, which is the importance of what it is to face something. What is the facing?
and that's why I was saying that it's misleading to talk about encounter, because that implies a pre-existence of things that
Two
encounter
entities.
each other.
Yes. But I totally agree. But I think that people, speaking on behalf of the entire group, I was thinking that maybe what that comment might have, the notion of facing might have been understood as if a facing can't be established, then it's not art.
Well, the facing, well, yeah, for my way of looking at it, art would not be an algorithm working without any humans around. That's a limit that I can see, because like I'm still attached to this human dimension of art. I will see it's mattering otherwise, but I cannot imagine to depart from this human or sentient somehow that dimension. I would say that it would be like mattering in general. So I would see art as a subspecies of mattering, in which you do need to have some.
But isn't that
some
then,
sentient.
that's still then? It sounds to me like a hierarchical arrangement.
Well,
If
I
you're
think
saying
it's
subspecies.
a ratio. It's the facing is the colon of the ratio, just like Glenn Gould.
You mean the two dots?
The two dots. Glenn Gould said the correct ratio of artist to audience is 1 to 0. but he
Get a lot
never.
of blame, though.
Yeah, he's such a warm person. But I'm not sure that that was. I think people usually took that to mean that he wanted to play his piano alone. But I'm not sure that that's what it did mean. I think the thing is completely reversible, and that what he then did was eradicate the artist completely.
Mm-hmm.
And he was only left with the audience, and so that you've got this fluidity, but you can have art, and it is the facing is the ratio. If one side is 0, then it's always there's always a problem. It's always the ability to fluidly interchange.
Wouldn't it be there is no 0 and 1 in what he's arguing?
Well, it's almost an impossibility, but
There's
as an
only the
impossibility, it's fluid.
But I think that from how I'm understanding your work is that it's not really a colon, it's actually the equal sign, let's say. And they only, so it's, instead of being like that, to 2 dots, it's like this, that pulls something together, and the pulling together is what creates the artwork, is what is the art. Is that?
No.
No.
Not even that. It just, yeah, I think it's very difficult for me to talk about it because it makes sense, this discourse on art, on the artwork, according to this ontology that it follows deconstruction, follows mattering, and it works in its own. But then when it comes to try to create a bridge of speaking how this works in relation to an ontology of pre-existing entities, it just seems like there are 2 languages that I cannot really bridge.
But that's what I'm saying. That's why there aren't any entities. There are no pre-existing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's the equal thing. I mean, that's just a visual expression of the fact there's no entities on either side.
Yeah,
because there's no side.
Okay, so it's an equal without anything on the sides of the.
But that is exactly what Dane's doing. Also, don't you think, Dane, or is that not what you're doing? I'm remaining silent. People can speak.
About me. It's not about me.
No, seriously, in terms of, because it does get into Haraway's work, I mean, in terms of, there isn't sides to the question. There's not like the object and the subject to the question. In fact, the reason I did the remark of when the tree falls, it's a very old question in philosophy that has been raised over millennia. If the tree falls in the forest and no one was there to hear it or see it fall, did it fall? And there have been debates which are really quite extreme. And
it's just the question itself.
I know
it's
the
just
question.
silly.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The question's also silly. No, I agree. Yes, yes, but it certainly is one that in trying to. Well, it is silly, which is why for me the answer was always let's move on.
Yeah,
that's
but,
why.
But even replying is
just wrong.
It's wrong because the tree itself hears itself in a way. If you want, I mean, the tree is part of a continuity, discontinuity, like of a bigger system, and you don't need anything external to hearing or seeing it. It is
right.
It is mattering going on.
Which is why that question doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And so in answering the question, yes, it has fallen, or it's done whatever it's done with itself. It's the same thing as dismissing the question.
Yeah, because this is a holistic becoming, and you would need.
Any other questions about this? Moving swiftly on, Sarah. Yes, Thomas.
Who cares?
Yeah, well, that's his
no, but I mean not in a very harsh way, but in that way also.
In what way? In Theo's way?
Yeah, because like about caring,
That's right.
kind of caring and repair, you know, like because like how to combine these 3. No, I mean if the tree falls, then who cares? Like, sort of say gently.
Philosophers do, obviously.
Yes. And then like again coming back to the question of asking, do you need like for an artwork to be born, do you need to have a human being, coming to experience it, and having that
And it was like the difference that matters, whereas is like the mattering is the
Yes.
difference that matters. So
Yes.
I think that's what you mean when you say who cares.
Yeah, caring, mattering.
Yes.
What recomposes around that break in the forest somehow. I mean,
Yes.
there's some reaction at some level, and it's not just a kind of human on fringes. It's it's maybe an event in what's known as this.
Well, what you're facing is
Yeah,
is
and it's
an
also
event.
and it's also probably the hidden critique, or not very hidden critique on Dane's work, that who actually is
not
gonna
as hidden as you think, you know.
who's gonna actually care about, like, who's gonna see that mattering as something that matters, in a sense. Is the sensuous side of it displayed on the screen, or is it something that has to do with this idea that it is a sort of living creature that is becoming, and how do you deliver this concept? How can you make it sensuous?
I don't think it's. I think there's a precedent there, which is there's no difference between what Dane is doing and a book. It's like Hollier in Against Architecture, who describes the book, which is both completely intact, finished, and existing in its fully composed and realised state there. Once it's then picked up, or if it, at the same time it can be picked up, and then it becomes a continuum, and the two things exist in different modalities, and I don't see that Dane's construction stroke project is really any differs from that as a precedence, so I'm not sure that it needs to be philosophized any kind, unless there's somebody can suggest there's any real departure from that, and there's anything kind of new. I mean, I appreciate there's nothing, that's not to denigrate it. I mean, I think it's quite impressive. So when I invented something, it's kind of like a book, but it's not. I think that's pretty substantial in itself. But to think it
new that
through.
you're putting forward. This is the thing, and the same thing is going to be said about your work, Sarah, and your work, because anybody that's doing work in, let's say, the digital, and claiming a status of art for it, is going to run into this kind of argument that it's cold, it's horrible, doesn't exist unless you have all the equipment for it, and it always screws up because the technology fails, and so on and so forth. You got to. So, come on, Sarah, answer this guy. What do you have to say to him?
Yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by the whole sort of Einstein-Bergsonian kind of debate going on.
Okay, can you explain that?
Well,
in
20 seconds.
No, in not because Bergson might mean one thing and then Einstein something else, but a lot of people might not know what you mean when you say the Bergson or you mean Einstein.
Right, I guess
because there's newbies in the room. Remember that.
I'm referring to the great sort of meeting of the minds that happened. When was it, 1920? Yeah. And Einstein basically said, time is what it is. It's measurable. It's a thing. And Bergson said, no, it's completely dependent on our perception of it. And Einstein said, no, you're wrong. And that was just.
Then they took their toys and went home.
They took their toys and went home. Yeah, but since then, we have a whole sort of, the privileging of the sort of scientific discipline over phenomenology, for example, and it's interesting then to sort of combine that with, say, Stenger's, particularly in ecology, and Brad, in fact, bringing all those things sort of back together in the sense that they do matter and they do intertwine. There isn't that bifurcation that on the surface appears to be very sort of, well, that's a thing, and that's not. They do need to come together. Did I make any sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Does anybody else want to speak on Dane's behalf before Dane does? Good, Dane.
I went to see Georgia O'Keeffe recently, and it was really interesting what she wrote, because she got really annoyed with people saying her flowers are sexual, and she said all that you're doing is putting your own perception onto my work, and that's not how I drew them, and that's not what they're meant to be. And I think that's a really interesting question as well, because everybody brings their own prejudices and their own perceptions about art, and when they see it they bring all that, and so everybody sees your piece or Dane's piece differently, don't they?
But I would claim that no, because it's the artwork is this encounter or event that happens any time in a different way, and so there's no me projecting my opinion on your work. If it works, it's something that is a bit like it breaks the law, going back to the first pages of difference repetition. Like there's no generality about it. If it happens, there's no way to say exactly why it did happen. And I think artwork is only when that sort of bracket, some little miracle that cannot be totally explained happens.
But you're talking about the facing thing being only something that can be experienced by, you said sentient beings, but I'm guessing that you meant human.
Well, I guess, yeah.
But
so,
I mean,
because I think art is a cultural product of our culture anyway.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's why yeah.
But then different people from different cultures would see it differently as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's why something can be art for someone or a community of people, and will not be art shifting very slightly the kind of cultural broth, or like something that was art will stop being art because of overexposure, because it becomes banal, or something becomes possible to turn into art because culture shifts. If I think about Raphael, for instance, who really was a great artist at some time and still can be a great artist for some people, but many people will not really be able to encounter his art because they've been exposed to so much stuff that's been after Raphael, that even if they never really saw anything by him, what was kind of creating a violence, creating like a sort of a slippage, a gap or something, has been leveled a lot.
But you mentioned going back in time, but if we take something then going forward in time and take that notion of sentience, what about machine learning, for example? What about artificial intelligence? Because if culture arises out of sentience, then eventually some sort of machine culture may come across Dane's work and think that it's a Raphael.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Also, like the way in which Google Image works, like suggesting which kind of images look like an image you were looking after. Definitely. I personally don't care because I'm not looking at that. But yeah.
But it's always about, it has to be specific, doesn't it? From what I understand from Brad. It's about localizing something, and then what matters to you, or it doesn't. Does that make sense?
But there's still matter that arises.
Oh yes.
Yeah, go on.
Can I have a variation on the theme, which touches this succinct question? The violinist Joshua Bell did a little experiment which turned badly sour for him. He busked, and this is in New York where he lives, and basically no one gave a shit. People just walked past and he was just another violinist. Might be one of the most famous violinists in the world, but he was just another violinist. His agent then rearranged it, and he did it again, but this time kind of known. This was in Central Station in New York, and had several thousand people there, and made a kind of media thing of it to kind of recover something of his own reputation from that particular experiment. But I think that's a quite a useful illustration of the particular context, the particularity of that moment, of that exchange.
Interesting. Oh, no, you just have your hand in your head. Go on.
From what I understand from Brad, a cut is always specific. I mean, it's not a general. When you make a cut, it's a cut. Things.
And it doesn't matter whether or not there's sentient beings or otherwise.
No, there's a nice. Francois Julien talks about coincidence. So there's a coincidence going on, but it doesn't necessarily even mean a facing.
Mm-hmm.
For me, facing tends to throw me back into the episteme, because if you look at the root of that word, it comes from to stand in front of. And for me, that that with a conditional report, if you're looking at an object, you have that subject-object there.
Okay. Well, I'll try to argue by writing that probably you don't necessarily need to objectify or to subjectify, and you can also have this sort of So now I can't really remember the exact words, but when Baral talks about this continuous reconfiguring of mattering, of matter as mattering, and that touches itself, that also like the atoms, like letting electrons go and just pick them up again. There's a level of facing, of sort of creating a relative cut, a relative discontinuity, because there's a discontinuity, but it is also part of a continuity anyway. So in a kind of post-human way, maybe we can say that art is something, and it is made of all this infinite and sort of like infinite moments of art encounters, and through the repetition of this, what happens is a sort of a algorithm in which what art is keeps changing, and what art can be, the possibility of what art can be keeps shifting in a mattering way, and so people are actually not really existing on their own. They're just the other side of art itself that keeps touching itself and turning into something new at any time.
Which is what you would, I think, say about your work, no?
Lots of.
Can you jump in at some
Well, yeah, first of all, I think we should add Wittgenstein to the reading list somewhere, because
because you
how sense is made in a language game, as he calls it.
And which would you suggest most? What? No, I'm thinking philosophy and grammar. No.
Philosophical investigation.
Philosophical investigation, sure.
Yeah, either one of those. Or maybe remarks on foundation of mathematics, if you.
Yeah, that's really great.
Or lectures, shall we?
What's that?
Or lectures on foundations of mathematics. I was getting confused.
Well, there's the 1939 lectures on the foundations of mathematics, which is, I think, sharper. In a certain
that's
sense.
one where he gets into this
With the
thing
big
of
argument of
Turing.
Turing, yeah. So that's always fun. And you're right. I mean, that's where he establishes why physics is more critical than mathematics, because mathematics ends up talking about the abstraction in a way that you're correctly rejecting the stupid question of the tree and the thing, because it's very mathematical. The way it's being put forward is very, it encourages an abstraction. Whereas what Wittgenstein is arguing is the importance of physics, which is of course what Barad is. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Well, I'll go back a bit.
Okay.
I was just going to reiterate why Leibniz is so important to
Okay.
think about it. Let's go back to the tree problem. It's not that the tree in some sense knows it has to fall. It's not that it's just subject to laws. It's part of a system, a continuum. It's matter sort of knows where to go and how to act in a very sort of blurred, perceptual way. Leibniz's monadology is a very rough idea of an algorithmic sort of universe where things sort of know how to act when certain thresholds are reached or when certain conditions are met. It's not that things are subject to laws, it's that things in their acting sort of know how to respond to the situations they're in. And that's not just applied to humans, that's applied to trees or rocks to varying degrees of sort of clarity in how to respond to different things. And yet that's one of the core things which I feed into sort of how I figure algorithms, how they respond to different things, how do certain things feed back into them, how they move across time, how do they sort of make time, that sort of thing. And yet again in Barad, how things matter is how there's again a knowing how to meet things halfway again. How
Would you say that her meeting halfway is Alberto's facing?
it could be. I don't know.
Well, facing Alberto's facing according to Alberto is has to do with seeing all at once.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay,
it's a
right,
specific
right, that's true. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so sorry, go on. Yeah, that makes sense.
So in a sense, it's not just about how the tree falls. If the tree falls, it's how that iteratively reconfigures the forest, everything, how it might affect migration patterns. And this is what Barod calls phenomena, phenomena of the interaction.
But that's what Haraway taught us about. Was
undoubtedly, I went Haraway. But yeah, that's.
Sorry. So, is there a moment in which some parts of your algorithm creature creates a cut, sort of like a relative cut, and touches itself, or you set up everything at the beginning, and its growth does not fold into itself. It just keeps going in a direction that are changing through time, but like how
therefore linear.
I just don't understand if it's a complex linearity or if there's actually some moments in which you have some sort of infolding and almost cannibal or something in which something like totally new happens after you set up the very first parameters.
In a sense that the program.
Like, is there any paradox at any time?
No, not in this one. It loops a specific set of instructions, but those instructions again feedback onto themselves. So a new value comes in and changes everything in the loop, and then that new value is fed back in again. So it produces itself through sort of what's in it. The code sort of acts as matter that sort of matters as it loops. It creates its own visual aesthetics.
But you knew that was going to happen because that's how the algorithm is set up. Those loops.
Yes, but how it sort of visualises itself, how it generates aesthetics, ethics is another different sort of dimension to it.
What did you do with your mistakes when you were creating the algorithms?
Well, they don't run.
They just don't run at all?
You'll just say error. It's missing a semicolon. I can't run this. It'll just crash. So there are rules to how these things sort of work.
Yeah.
But
different programs work in different ways. There's something obviously with data bending, for example. You get a result, but not necessarily the result that you were after. I just wondered if it was possible with a generative algorithm to get it to actually recognise its mistakes and use it.
I mean, if you use something like a deep learning library, like an artificial neural net that could somehow look back at its net and identify where something would come into contradiction with a point in its programming, it could sort of fix that.
Is that basically the principle behind AlphaGo, which was the software that plays Go is a Japanese board game, sort of personal passion. But I think that was sort of DeepMind software. So it played itself millions of times and kind of improved its game in that way. But through it's not something I know much about, so I'm asking really.
I suppose with playing Go that it has more rules. It has very specific rules to follow, so it can track a number of possibilities. But it doesn't go through each possibility 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks at a move, looks at so many moves ahead, so many moves behind, so it predicts behaviour behind. looks possibilities forward, and it sort of synthesises them together somehow to figure out what's the best course of action, what's the calculated risk it needs to sort of enact, I suppose.
So it's this calculation that's annoying everybody. Or
Calculation that's
everybody
not
who's
formal,
annoyed
but
is,
it's
yeah, is
how
worried
do you
about
make
the way
an
in which the
informed
calculation
calculated
is
risk?
over-rationalizing, and therefore...
Yeah.
I think I'm annoyed by the linearity, like of it.
But that's the calculation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to put a mark on the computing.
No,
like,
but it's not calculating as in computing, as in having a logic that goes in this direction, basically, into infinity. And because you're saying that what's required is this kind of, not a feedback loop, but anyway, some sort of other thing.
A paradox, I think. Like, so far I'm kind of convinced that any outlook requires at least one paradox. Like, I think a good plan requires a paradox, possibly an outlook too. Two paradoxes, not to be just funny. No, I think that I don't see the discriminant for that to be more than a simulation, and for that to be an outlook, I will need moment of gap of like some vertigo. And the only vertigo I see is the kind of Kantian sublime of this goes on infinite. I mean, providing the hardware and everything and electricity, this might go on for as much as the universe goes, which is very conceptual for me. It still doesn't talk about what I see. It's just an idea.
You just made a distinction when you said a good artwork as opposed to an artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think there are any bad artworks. They're not artworks.
Can you, David, do you have anything to say about this?
Well, it seemed to be more of
debate?
a particular critique in the end of the work, because you did introduce the word good. A good artwork has
Did I say good?
At least one paradox, and so.
Okay, but I was wrong. I think maybe just one paradox is there's the risk of a joke, of a pun, like there's slippage of sense that makes you laugh. If you have more than a paradox, I guess there's no way to detect one oddity, and you cannot really laugh. Like, but this is just very raw footage. I'm not gonna sign this.
David, what do you think? Because your work is dealing with algorithms and various other things. Can you speak to this?
Yeah, well, I don't know that it deals with algorithms in the way
Not in the way
that
that
Dane
you
does.
yeah.
But I'm interested in certain kind of processes and methodologies that might ultimately become algorithmic or a sense of binaries. And yeah, I don't know. I suppose I don't know where to take this, because my work is so different, and it is my work is, I think, tries to be quite deeply sensual. So it doesn't set up a kind of discussion where there isn't this faceness that you're talking about is absolutely primary to kind of how I see my work. So I suppose I think I'm quite different from Dane in that I could never set up a system which I didn't think was might not be accessed by an audience, which is that the clear possibility of this is that it has no audience, which I think is really interesting. It's just a process, and it can run without, as long as there's juice, it will run, and that's why your question around it needs a paradox to be art particularly interested me, because I think that it's yeah, sorry, I don't know where I'm going with this.
Well, that's the paradox.
Yeah.
The paradox is that it could potentially have no audience.
Yeah.
So does that make it? Does that fulfil the criteria of art if it's unseen and unheard? I mean, that's what we've really come back to the tree, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sad.
I know. Sorry to wrap things up so tightly.
Well done.
Yeah, but the point is how do you actually set it up? like because this is what we how we wrap it after having talked about it. But like the sensuous question is how an artist will put this like on stage, like on the exhibition, and which is the exposure to all this background questioning of what art is and etc.
Well, personally, I would suggest that that's a political process or a political decision, and it has to be made both individually by the artist and socially by the community. I'm not sure that I've got a particular kind of straight answer, but I definitely think that it's a political, it's the politics. It's less a paradox and more a politics of the work itself. You know.
Well, I think one of the charges that's being thrown against Dane here, poor little Dane, is
never show my work again.
Is that some people here think it's not sensuous, and that's what I think is coming down to, that those people that can access it as a sensuousness don't have this problem that is seeing face or not face, because to me it does exactly what you're claiming. You can face it, you know, so there's no issue there, you know, even if it goes running off into a direction or if it just sits there and goes and waves, you know, or something. It has nothing to do with that in that sense. It doesn't have to do with that, the aspect of the algorithm.
Yeah, but this is subjectivity. You still need to explain why it works.
No. Go on. You're shaking your head. You got involved.
I'm very happy with it being set in motion, but surely paradox for me isn't the right word, but there's nothing to stop in the future somebody intervening into that to set it off in a different direction. So don't you then lose that linearity that you're so worried about?
Yeah, sure.
That if somebody comes in and
it's a matter of how you frame it. It's a matter of how you frame it.
But that doesn't have to be a human intervention. That can be a machine. That can be a glitch in the system, or as we saw with your thing.
Yeah,
you know, it's not so clear.
That's exactly what. But in a, I mean, something about the thinking, that it is walking and it is thinking. This thing is thinking. That's the first step when I kind of, it gets confusing, you could say, because we expect to do the thinking, not it doing the thinking, not it that is not a body, because this is not a body. This is something that thinks in it. You are attempting to make it think.
I completely disagree. I think what you're looking at is the manifestation of the performance, and the performance is the algorithm. Yeah, the algorithm absolutely isn't thinking. It's purely exuberant, and it's completing depending on which modality you want to view it in. It's completing what its telos, if you like, and it's doing it without thought, in the most exuberant way. No head, no mind, just pure action. So if it was rather than a thinking mind, it's a body of algorithm without any kind of master structure. Even Dane hasn't got any particular control over it, except for the fact he's sort of released it into the wild, so to speak. But he hasn't kind of designed it. It's already been identified. So I think it's not thinking. It's a performative thing. You know, in that sense, it's very sensual if you like your sensualities, in algorithmic form.
Okay.
And I'm sure there's a lot of people who do.
I would suggest maybe to exhibit that in a somewhere where there's lots of choreography, like not with people dancing, like in the context of choreography performance. That would probably tune me into the right modality to look at it. Just an idea at this moment. Because I do think that the bias of this context and listening to what's behind in specific conceptual ways turn me into looking at it in a specific manner. But like if it was set up and like you have this people dancing and you have an algorithm performing, probably there would be something that would create this moment of broken expectation, and something that I would relate in a sense.
I just think you're setting up completely normative exploration of the
absolutely.
brain. I think the interesting thing is nobody has to see it. It's just out there in the world. You don't exhibit it. You just feed it on somehow into the net, and that's it.
Sorry.
So you put no title, no explanation at all.
The dancing people in many ways are the pixels that Dane's associated with the function of the algorithm, because those are artificial, and those are secondary. There's secondary aspects. They're just manifestations. Nothing really to do with the algorithm. They're kind of the Pan's people to the algorithm. What? Audience too young?
No, old.
No.
Oh, come on.
They're sexist. They're horrible.
Pixels are, garish.
Okay, so we didn't really get to Barada as much as but in a certain sense we did. This is a good kickoff, I think. A good send-off. Dane, thank you for being the sacrificial lamb here. I think that it's given us a lot of mileage, in fact, and my suggestion is to show this in the project space that Stuart was going on about. I think it would be quite an interesting thing. Just have it sitting there. And it might be like the violinist who people walk by and the whole crowd comes to look at it. But okay, so next week let's focus on this question of event, mattering, the life force, and who would like to sort of be responsible for the first 2 chapters or so of Iran.
I'll give it a go.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Great. Anybody want to help Barnaby? Sure? Okay, Simon. That's good. Well, you made a face.
Wasn't a yes face.
No, sorry.
We've been through the 3C, it's a no but face. A yes and face.
Oh my god. Okay, great. So the 2 of you can work together. Okay, great.
Emily.
Oh, Franco B. Yes, I did mention at the outset.
No, I didn't.
I'm hoping that he'll be able to either come to the seminar or we'll just get tickets to go.
It's on this website. You
No.
can see this, and the way that shows it, I've been told the way that it shows them, it's got a zoom in and out button.
Who is
So
doing
you
that?
can zoom in and it's really cute. It says no reaction. But yeah, it's
Don't worry, I'm talking about
Some patterns, some pieces of body and
But in the meantime, Joe, you just look your tickets.
I don't know when I did
No, I'm just kidding.
there's a lot of stuff on it's a print. It's a print. When he shows it, it's a print.
I always think I think I should remember
Yeah. You go to the
that seems to me to be
nice.
And you
running the stairs. See you later, okay? Yes, we'll do
Yeah, take a look at it at some point.
Yeah, so I used to stuff. It was a very, very small room. I mean, it was, my space that I used was about, really small, but I didn't realise until I used it that you can so it's using HTC Vive. You can basically just project yourself into another space, and you can turn around the space that you've just been in, so you're expanding the room. Yeah, it's so cool.
Can you send it to me?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, because you have to map it out, don't you?
I'm so not involved.
But yeah, it's just really funny. And also you can because I made like a little creature and then zoomed away and you can
I'll see you later.
armies of them that would just fill up the space. It's all very well. I don't know whether that's specific to that program. I mean, what are you using? Are you using
I don't know, this was an event I went to set up loads of techniques trying playing with it, and you just saw the sort of different things with it. So I don't know what we
Yeah, because I'm usually it's either a PhD